I know, guys, it took me 10 years to understand it, so I'm not... yeah.
So Sylvia, there was an eruption, it was high, and all the ashes come down. So it's not immediately next to the volcano. It's out a little bit from the volcano. Because if it was next to it, it would be like a
debris flow. Right, you're
There's
right.
nothing like that. So it has to be a bit further spread from that.
Yes.
And it has to be big to create a layer that thick.
You're right. But you have, I think I mentioned, you have the present day, or recent example is Taupo. The eruption of Taupo 26,000 years ago covered the whole northern island. The whole northern island.
Yeah.
So, near the volcano you have this big lahar with big blocks. But if you go farther away, you start to find them tooth of lamina. So imagine that here, you might have had something similar to the northern island and the southern island of New Zealand. So you had a huge volcano, or huge...
So is the tooth the
It's ash.
and that's like the sandy ash.
Yes.
Grey sandy ash.
Yes, because then you had also
And then
rivers.
there's also the sand, which is the yellow, which is from the rivers.
Yes.
Which is a
Yes.
lower energy than the ash or high. It's thicker. Generally it's coarser.
The ash changes in energy as well, because first you have the big eruption, and then the rivers also, what they did is they distributed the ash after you had this huge eruption. If you go to New Zealand, you actually see exactly the same thing. So now here you are. So this is a very complicated environment in Glenrock. And do you agree with me that it is a lot more complicated than the environment at Dudley? Because what complicates the environment is the ash. The ash is the volcanic, it's the volcanic eruption. So you have a body of tufaceous sensor with sedimentary structure which are extremely high energy. And you start to thinking, oh my God, what would be the interpretation with your data? The coal, the silt, and the normal sand with crossbed. What would be your interpretation of the general environment of the position for Glenrock?
You know mine. You know mine.
Oh, so say it aloud. Oh, he's already gone. Yeah.
So it's a floodplain of a meandering river
Okay.
that has been hit.
Good. You said it. It's a floodplain of a meandering river. So, that is again your interpretation, and that is interpretation based on facts.
But
Do
that
you?
could be wrong.
But it could.
But I technically write my report, not say it was a floodplain of a meandering river. Give you evidence, say it was
If you
something
give
else.
me evidence that it's something different, I accept your evidence. If the evidence,
never allowed to
if the evidence leads you, okay, this is the way you, again, you're writing a report, you're not writing a paper. It's a scientific report, but it could also be an industrial report. So industry asks you the same. So you give the interpretation, and remember that the interpretation, for example, suppose it's for industry, interpretation will be used to establish the potential continuity of the coal seams underground. So if you tell people this is a braided river system, If your boss knows geology, we said, oh poop, the coal seams are going to end in a very short, I mean, we are not, but if you tell your boss, these are peat bogs in a meandering river plain, the boss will start saying, maybe they are continuous. Then if you go like him and say, I'm sure this is a lower delta plain, your boss will go like, yes! It's going to be continuous. Yes, let's drill. If you are wrong,
So, yeah, but is it the same seam that goes up to the lagoon where they used to mine the coal before? So they used to mine coal up in the lagoon, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the same flight plane? You don't know.
Because, again, I mean, here, based on the story that we are seeing here, first of all, we did see a very tiny little bit, right? So, let's continue a little while, and then we go and see Susan Gilmore. So, Karen already said, okay, I have seen that. Dudley is on top of Glenrock. Good, okay, so it's younger. Interpretation, again, what happens between the two times, between these two time spans? Sea level 4. So you
So is that how it goes from being on the floodplain to being a river because the sea level drops down and there's so much less?
so the sea level drops, and we don't know whether it is eustasy, meaning is a global sea level drop, or regional, a simple sea level drop because maybe you have uplift. It's as simple as that. So it's a relative. Simply the sea level drops. So the system, imagine that before the energy was lower, and then the energy becomes higher because the system is rejuvenated, okay? So from a braided river, from a meandering river, you have a braided river system. Now, do you remember how you call a sea level drop in terms of
Regradation.
Progradation is what a delta does, so
Regression.
regression is a sea level drop, and transgression is sea level rise. Now, here is a big leap of imagination, guys. Somehow it's important to understand when your call formed. Between a transgression and a regression, what do you think the sea level does to, or must do, to obtain or to allow to obtain at least a meter of coal, which means 10 meters of peat?
Sea level has to be fairly high because it has to be, the water has to be around everywhere to maintain
Perfect.
the bog for such a long time.
Perfect. This is a high stand. So now it's a speculation, but it's a reasonable speculation to hypothesize that Glenrock represents a high level stand.
High level what?
A high level stand. It's called a high stand system tract. But this is sequence stratigraphy.
Say that again for us.
So, in order to allow
My level
a
stand.
meter
I think it is, yeah.
hole, you need to have 10 meters of peaks. So how do you get the meters of peaks?
Pretty sure I read
The
it.
sea level has to be and remain relatively high. It's not transgressive and not regressive. It's just being high. There is a balance between the subsidence and the sea level. So it's called a high step. Then sea level drops. And you have your
Look a bit stuck
gradually.
there, Lucas. Huh? You look a bit stuck. Look a bit stuck. I am a bit stuck. I am a bit stuck.
So more or less of this, you have collected your data. You have to use, so in the report, please use the observation that you have written in your stratigraphic logs and in your block diagram. And remember, when you write the reports, refer to the figures. When you discussed Dudley and you said, I believe that this is a braided river because of this and this and that, open parenthesis, figure 1, the block diagram of blah, blah, blah. So always do that. Tie your written text to the figures. So now, more or less, you have you have gone through a discussion, and then you will have your conclusions. But also, every part of the discussion has to be tied in again to your observation, because this is the way your learning outcomes go. The first learning outcome is the capability of observation. And that is the core of everything. Remember that in 10 years your observation will be still valid. Maybe the interpretation is not, but the observation is. So I go back to your observation. Okay? Any questions?
Given this is a report based on our observation,
Sorry?
given this is a report on our observation,
Yeah.
should we refer to any literature in the discussion? Should we refer to any literature, like any books? Or,
Wow, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any suggestions?
David has a very good point. Yoo-hoo! So, David's point is a very scientific one. But David has already taken 3280, so you know. You refer to literature if you want also to give or provide more insight. How do you get, okay, strategy. How would you get the correct literature if you don't ask me? Google Scholar. So what would you type as keywords in Google Scholar?
Newcastle cold measures.
Newcastle coal measures. Perfect. So you type Newcastle coal measures.
And don't go through the library because you won't find it. Google Scholar will find it, and then you can find it in the library.
Yes.
But if you put in the title of the article you find, you won't find it in the library. Yeah. So if it says it's in
So the search
by
things is
Taylor
really
online or something, you go to Taylor online, then you look for it, and it'll pop up.
Yeah. But anyway, you type Newcastle coal measure, then you can type Permian, and you can type environment of deposition. So these are the things you have, again, you have to learn. You have to learn how to use keywords in Google Scholar. So it is perfectly correct that the best thing to say is type Newcastle core measures. And then you will have a few papers coming out. So, other criterion, which paper would you look for? How would you select a paper? What would be your criterion to select the most reliable paper, maybe, or?
Most recent paper.
So one of the things, for example, one of the things I look for is the number of citations. If it says that it has been cited 200 times, maybe I should look at it. If it's been cited twice, I don't care. Okay. Then the other thing is the date. So if a paper is 1930s, 1950s, or 1970s, maybe it could be already older. So I prefer to start looking at the new ones. So I don't remember if the last paper I keep referring to is 1996, something like that. Anyway, that is exactly what you should do. You find the paper, and you will find that this paper is telling you everything about the volcanoes, and there is a complete reconstruction of the whole environment of deposition. And this guy will cite the old guy and said, he got it wrong. But again, and this is a little bit of narrative, the professor who was professoring coal whatever at Newcastle a long time ago came from Germany. So the whole environment of deposition of the German coal is different from the Newcastle coal. Because the Newcastle coal, and I keep throwing it in, the story of this margin has been the same since at least the Permian, if not before. In Europe, you had the Pangaea, and then the Pangaea broke, and then, a lot of time the continents got together and broke apart again in different parts. So that's why the story is different. Okay, so I think we can, if you don't have any other questions, we could move to Susan Gilmore. For those who weren't here, your quiz is in Blackboard. Today's quiz is in Blackboard because I forgot to print it.
And it's due on Monday. Due on Monday.
Yeah, you can send it to me online if you want and you don't want to print